Deep Sea Embers Chapter 401 to 405. The silent cathedral was at the heart of the independent city-state, situated on the mountainous peak of Frost. Its presence was as subtle as it was imposing, serenely nestled on the mountain apex. The brooding clouds overhead bestowed an additional veneer of hushed silence to the already solemn and melancholic structure. The cathedral's towering spires shot up into the misty atmosphere, standing tall and fierce like thorny blades, surveying the city sprawled below. Amid the throng of city dwellers, a figure of unusual height casually sauntered across the open plaza that lay before the cathedral, taking in the picturesque scenery as if he were a simple tourist. Soon, another man emerged from the bustling crowd, an elderly gentleman, refined in demeanor, exuding an air of warmth beneath his dark brown coat. He strode purposefully towards the tall figure. Spotting Morris weaving his way through the crowd, Vanna took steps to inconspicuously relocate to a quieter section of the bustling area. Everything seems ordinary around the cathedral square. Vanna nonchalantly leaned against a lamppost, her gaze fixated on the cathedral's entrance a short distance away as she delivered her observation in hushed tones. Similar situation at City Hall. At least superficially, the residents here exhibit no indications of psychological or cognitive compromise, Morris commented while carefully cleaning his monocle. However, I've picked up on something. Oh, what's that? A few individuals close to the square were discussing the recent sewer investigations conducted by the authorities. Unless I misunderstood, they were referring to the second waterway, Morris disclosed. They mentioned a certain gatekeeper Agatha who seems to be heading the team. Gatekeeper Agatha? Vanna's brows furrowed slightly at the news, but the captain informed us. The genuine Agatha should be ensnared within an illusory doppelganger of Frost as we speak, Morris imparted with a low, serious tone. Which leads us to conclude that the person leading the team is likely an imposter. Vanna drew a slow, deep breath, then suddenly shifted her gaze upwards, fixating on the silent cathedral. The majestic and serious structure starkly contrasted against the backdrop of the gloomy sky, its spires eerily emerging from the thin fog. Her expression hardened. If nothing seems amiss with the cathedral, we're left with two likely scenarios. Either the impostor has managed to deceive the cathedral, or the Death Church of Frost can no longer be considered reliable. There's a significant problem brewing within the cathedral. Morris nodded gently in agreement. Regardless of the scenario, it's clear that the church has completely lost control of the situation. We need to depart immediately and relay this information to Mr. Duncan. Vanna nodded in silent approval and made her way towards the plaza's exit alongside Morris. However, before leaving, she shot one last glance at the sprawling space opposite the silent cathedral. This was where the city hall was located, the site of the erstwhile Winter's Court, now known as the Queen's Palace. As the fog thickened on the mountain peak, Vanna observed the structure, standing as silent as the silent cathedral, its spires reaching into the mist. The edifice surveyed the entirety of the island, standing tall against the sky, a silent sentinel beneath the foreboding sky. Abruptly, Vanna halted in her tracks, her body rigid as if frozen in place. Reacting to her unusual behavior, Morris swiftly spun around, his concern evident. Vanna? What did you see? Vanna didn't respond. Instead, she remained transfixed, staring intently into the swirling fog that provoked an uncanny sense of déjà vu in her. Bathed in the foggy haze, the city hall seemed to revert to its previous form. It was an architectural marvel, a palace-like edifice adorned with numerous arched domes. The grand, dignified main structure, cloaked in a pallor of grayish-white, was flanked by elongated corridors and continuous arches, extending on either side like a bird spreading its wings. The gloomy, black spires and tower-like structures characteristic of a cathedral were noticeably absent at first glance. Vanna? What's wrong? Morris's voice echoed again in the silent square. I caught a glimpse of another cathedral where City Hall stands. Vanna's voice broke through the silence, her tone low and grave. It was but for a fleeting moment, yet I am certain my eyes didn't deceive me. Another cathedral? Morris was taken aback. He instinctively swept his gaze across the plaza, but all that met his eyes was the seemingly normal City Hall. Nonetheless, he didn't doubt Vanna's discernment, not for a moment. This isn't a good omen, the elderly scholar muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively adjusting the hat perched atop his head. It seems that only you were privy to this vision, likely attributed to your divine sight as a cleric. which significantly surpasses that of a regular person. The appearance of this vision near the cathedral suggests an escalating contamination. Vanna remained silent, her brows knitted together in a troubled frown. She cast her gaze towards the city sprawled at the mountain's foot, staying quiet for a moment before slowly articulating, "The fog is thickening, engulfing everything in sight." The fog had first originated in the heart of Frost and then began its relentless spread throughout the city. Now, it's veiled the entire island in a hazy whiteness. "Look at the thick fog outside." Shirley's voice rang out from the second-floor bedroom window, her head protruding out as she craned her neck to take in the spectacle unfurling on the streets, her face a mask of surprise. Dog, too, wandered over to the window, his skeletal head nudging alongside Shirley's. After surveying the scene outside for a while, he abruptly broke the silence. The dense fog blanketing the city is usually due to a significant temperature disparity between day and night, coupled with human activities that trigger a rise in water vapor, subsequently increasing airborne dust particles. When the moisture-laden air circulating between the buildings undergoes rapid cooling, it results in. Shirley turned towards him, her expression one of confusion. "Dog, what on earth are you trying to say?" Dog is actually reciting a passage from Chapter 2 of The Logic Behind Nature. He's been engrossed in that book for the past few days, Nina remarked offhandedly, never taking her eyes off the homework spread across the desk beside her. "You should consider reading simpler books once in a while. It's quite effective in enhancing vocabulary. If text-heavy books intimidate you, you can start with picture books." Shirley paused for a moment, then retorted uncertainly, "Are you insinuating that my vocabulary is so poor that I'm only capable of reading picture books despite all my efforts to learn?" Nina, her attention already back on her homework, replied matter-of-factly, "No, I'm merely stating the obvious that you indeed can only handle picture books. There's no mockery in expressing facts." Shirley's face contorted, ready to burst out in indignation, but she was abruptly distracted by the intensifying fog outside the window and waved her hands dismissively. "Let's forget about that. Come take a look, the fog outside is exceptionally dense. I've never witnessed such a dense fog back in planned. Planned experiences marginal temperature variations between day and night, and the breezy mornings and evenings typically deter fog formation." Nina explained without lifting her gaze from her work. "I can look now, I still have a mound of unfinished homework. This test paper that Professor Morris assigned is remarkably challenging. The multiple-choice questions are designed to be deceiving. I can't shake off the feeling that I'm consistently choosing the wrong option." "Well, if you're unsure about an answer, always go with option C," Shirley suggested nonchalantly. Then a new idea seemed to cross her mind. "Hey Nina, do you feel like stepping out? We won't wander far. There's a pastry shop right across the street. Given the weather, it's unlikely they'll have many customers. We might get lucky and find some discounted cakes." "I'm not interested," Nina replied dismissively. "Feel free to go by yourself. If Uncle Duncan returns, I won't spill the beans." Her words were abruptly interrupted by an eerie, rustling sound that reverberated through the room, instantly putting a stop to the girl's chatter. "Did you hear something just now?" Shirley rapidly retreated from the window sill, her eyes darting around the room, a guarded expression on her face. Nina grew alert too, but as her eyes instinctively swept the room, she noticed something peculiar happening on the pages of the exam paper and textbooks sprawled in front of her. The text appeared to be in motion, symbols spinning uncontrollably, the stark contrast of the black and white ink marks seemingly coming alive, trembling inexplicably. Along the edges of those jittery strokes, black shadows began to spread out like seeping ink, rapidly blanketing the entire paper. Within the span of a heartbeat, every textbook and paper that Nina had been diligently studying moments ago began to quiver and convulse with an eerie intensity. A dissonant chorus of whispers melded with the unsettling rustling sound, reverberating ominously throughout the room. "Ah! Your books have been possessed," Shirley hollered in astonishment, her instincts prompting her to raise the chain that bound her to Dog. As her outcry echoed within the room, an insidious entity, lured by the essence of wisdom and knowledge, started manifesting itself in the physical world and infiltrating it. Swirls of dark dust stormed and swirled violently, coalescing into a tangible shape. Scattered skeletal fragments rattled and rolled across the floor, rapidly morphing into a grotesque, spine-chilling creature. 3 menacing dark hounds materialized on the floor, letting out intimidating growls, their eyes ablaze with turmoil and insanity. Their eyes then fell upon Dog, who lay stunned in the empty space by the window. Three malevolent dark hounds locked gazes with an intelligent counterpart. Shirley thought she detected a fleeting moment of confusion in the demeanors of the native demons. But such unexpected circumstances didn't hamper her reactions. The black chain rattled and clinked as Shirley lifted her arm high, leveraging an enormous force to swing Dog around like a devastating meteor hammer. The next moment, he whizzed through the air and barreled towards the demon closest to the window. "I'm gonna whip you into shape." With a thunderous crash, two canine heads violently collided. The poor demon, who recently emerged from the shadowy abyss, was clearly no match for Dog, who had honed his combat skills through years of rigorous training with Shirley, be it in terms of skull strength or reaction speed. The first shadow demon crumbled into shards upon the initial impact. Meanwhile, the second shadow demon had just enough time to part its jaws, but before it could let out a fierce roar, it was assailed by a wave of blistering heat. An inferno flared from the side, and Nina landed a searing kick with an incredible temperature of 6,000 degrees Celsius. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Since adjusting to her new life on board the ship, Nina had become skilled at managing the myriad challenges that popped up in the course of her academic pursuits. These challenges were diverse and complex, ranging from apparitions originating from the spirit realm casting sinister shadows, to terrifying abyssal shadow demons making sporadic appearances, and even inconsistencies found within the pages of her textbooks. Her rigorous and methodical training schedule had significantly contributed to her remarkable progress in controlling her magical abilities. As a testament to her growing prowess, she had learned to unleash a kick of such power that its temperature soared to 6,000 degrees Celsius. Yet, she managed to control the heat in such a way that nearby items, such as bunk beddings, would remain unaffected and undamaged. In one memorable incident, a blinding flash of light filled the room. It was the manifestation of Nina's might, and under its glare, a shadow demon was instantly turned to dust. The radiance of the sun had obliterated it entirely, leaving no signs of charring or any trace of a burnt smell. Instead, the room was permeated by the comforting scent of the beddings that had been warmed by the sun's rays. The final remaining dark hound, a creature conjured from one of Nina's textbooks, stood at the center of the room in confusion. Even for a creature governed by chaos and pure instinct, the sudden vanishing of its companions was puzzling. Waiting to face it was Dog, growling menacingly while under the firm control of Shirley, and Nina, walking steadily towards it, radiating a glow as fierce and intense as the midday sun. Upon sensing Nina's approach, the shadow demon swiveled its head towards her, meeting a gaze as blinding as the sun. As a result of this direct eye contact, the hound ignited, engulfed by the ancient and raw power of the solar sun. This scene left Shirley, who had never seen Nina in a fit of rage before, utterly taken aback. She had always considered Nina to be eternally jovial, never displaying anger. However, her assumption was proven wrong. Nina was indeed irate, and the heat and intensity of her anger were as awe-inspiring as the sunrise. Despite Nina trying to rein in her rage, the blazing light emanating from her was suggestive of a force powerful enough to incinerate a soul. As Shirley's unease grew, and she was about to intervene, Nina finally voiced her outrage. Plasma flames flickered at the corners of her mouth as she spoke, her voice echoing around the room like thunder. "My homework." The note of loss and anger in her voice was palpable as she continued. "My papers. My reference books. And even Shirley's homework. These demons have torn them all to pieces." Nina's anger paralyzed the demon in fear, while Shirley, battling to suppress her laughter, stuttered, "Really? My homework's gone too?" Realizing the situation was no time to laugh, Shirley tried to intervene before Nina could further retaliate against the demon. Wait. Leave this demon alone. Dog has a question for it." Nina, who was already in mid-swing to kick the demon, halted at Shirley's plea and turned to her friend. "What could we possibly ask? Isn't it simply another shadow demon that's been interfering with our studies? We've dealt with plenty of them already on the ship." "But it's daylight now," Shirley exclaimed, a note of urgency in her voice. Nina hesitated for a moment, and then the realization hit her. Despite the heavy mist making the sky as somber as twilight, it was technically daytime, a time when Vision 001 still maintained its protective veil over the world. During these hours, the city-state was safe from intrusion, and their study sessions wouldn't typically lure the attention of shadowy entities. So, what was causing these shadow demons to emerge now? With a burning intensity of 6,000 degrees Celsius, Nina's penetrating gaze fell upon the last remaining dark hound. The demon, finding itself in the direct path of Nina's solar brilliance, began to smoke as the heat started to consume its bones. It thrashed around, seemingly attempting to create a dimensional rift to escape back into the abyss. However, this instinctive response was quickly quashed by Dog, who interrupted the portal that had begun to form. "Are you able to extract any information from it?" Nina asked Dog, pulling back some of her overwhelming power. "You've previously stated that standard shadow demons lack intelligence and are incapable of communication, haven't you? Creatures without intellect remain as such, but upon closer inspection, you can sometimes discover fragments of memories within their chaotic minds," Dog responded, shaking his head, a residual motion likely from his recent clash with the other dark hound. "Don't worry, shadow demons possess their own unique language." "What kind of communication methods?" Nina and Shirley both asked at once, curiosity piqued. "They're rather unpleasant," Dog muttered, cautiously moving towards the immobilized dark hound, which had by now ceased struggling under Nina's blazing gaze. He cast a look at Shirley. "Close your eyes, Shirley." After a moment of hesitation, Shirley followed his instruction and shut her eyes tightly. A brief growl, a scuffle, and then the gruesome sound of bones being torn apart, crushed, and chewed resonated throughout the room. The demon's desperate struggle was short-lived. A while later, Shirley cautiously opened her eyes. All that was left at the center of the room was a small pile of rapidly disintegrating black dust. Dog stood beside the remains, while Nina stood a bit taken aback on the opposite side. The brilliant aura around her took a few moments to fade as she exclaimed in amazement, "Wow." Shirley pieced together what had happened while her eyes were closed. She gave Dog a complicated look. "Actually, I didn't." "You'd have nightmares, I know you." Dog shook his head, then ground his teeth and spat out distastefully, Did you break a tooth?" Chewing on an uneducated demon is like gnawing on a stone. You can't extract a coherent sentence from it despite its peculiar desire for knowledge, Dog remarked, expressing his disdain for his illiterate counterparts. His confidence and pride as an enlightened dark hound were clearly visible. Then, he lowered his head, seemingly to mull over the information he had just communicated with. A moment later, he lifted his head, an expression of puzzlement wrinkling his canine features. He turned towards Shirley and Nina, voicing his concerns. "It's strange, the residual memories of this dark hound suggest that it hasn't undergone the suppression of Vision 001. Shirley and Nina shared a glance of surprise. "But at this moment, it's clearly daytime." Shirley murmured almost to herself, slowly gravitating towards the window to survey the outdoors. The fog outside had consolidated into a thick mass that swathed the streets in veils of white. This dense shroud muted the daylight to a twilight-like gloom, rendering the buildings across the street nearly indistinguishable. Still, there was a visible patch of brightness in the sky marking the position of the sun. It was undoubtedly daytime under Vision 01's watchful eye. "Nina, look," Shirley gestured towards the skies above, "the sun is there." But then her voice trailed off abruptly. Within the conglomeration of dense fog and clouds, the bright luminescence fluttered a few times, then began to ripple outward like light reflecting off the surface of a pond. Upon closer inspection, it seemed that it wasn't the sun after all. It was merely a visual afterimage, a residual glow that lingered in the city's sky once the curtain of day lifted. Above their city of frost, the sun had vanished. Concurrently, deep beneath the Earth's surface, within the ancient and sealed second waterway under the metallic mine at the city's heart. The city's enveloping fog hadn't seeped into the underground, and minor anomalies on the surface did not impact the exploration team's operations. In the deep, forsaken subterranean world, the Church's guardian forces were diligently bolstering their newly established outpost. Steam-powered mechanical creatures, bearing a striking resemblance to spiders, navigated through the vast labyrinth of sewer corridors. High-powered searchlights probed every dark nook of the passage, and the multi-barreled cannons on the spider-like machines subtly adjusted their angles, perpetually on alert for shadows lurking in the darker intersections. Silent priests cloaked in black robes quietly offered prayers in bunkers at the crossroads, amassing strength for the impending offensive. Elite senior guardians fortified the entrances and gates, lanterns swaying from their waists, one hand clutching a staff, the other wielding a specially modified shotgun or large-caliber revolver. The second waterway had been under the dominion of darkness for an extensive period. Thus, venturing on an exploration mission into this gloomy abyss was less about investigation, and more akin to declaring war on a distorted, terrifying realm. The enemy could be anything, for the enemy was the darkness itself. An unusual sibilant noise resonated from a distant connection, interjected by the sounds of a large body wriggling and contorting. Two steam-powered walking machines stationed at the intersection were quick to respond. 4 potent flashbangs were launched from the arachnid-like machines, followed by the guardians manning the machine guns, who released a deluge of bullets towards the peculiar sound source. Amid the resounding clamor, the darkness rippled violently, suggestive of an injured entity on the verge of revealing itself. A dozen silent priests draped in black robes arose from their hiding spots behind the bunkers. They hoisted their holy books and directed their bandaged arms towards the darkness, their voices merging into a harmonious battle cry. In response to their call, pallid flames sparked into life within the darkness, aligning with the barrage from the steam walkers. The blaze immolated whatever monstrosity the darkness had birthed. Eventually, the agitated darkness retreated, calming down once more. The intersection gradually transitioned from an impenetrable black to a dim twilight until it was fully illuminated as it usually would be, rendering it visible to mortal eyes. However, there was no sign of any entity, only bullet-ridden walls exhibiting holes of diverse sizes and a fleeting, rapidly dissipating stench pervading the air. Agatha pulled her gaze away from the unsettling scene. Her mission wasn't to engage with these intersections. "Lead me to that door." The command fell from the lips of the gatekeeper, directed at one of his subordinates in a barely perceptible turn. Agatha, the appointed leader, assembled a compact yet fully equipped squadron of guardians. With a determined spirit, they embarked on their journey from the forward outpost, a position staked out by the army of the church. The path they tread was laden with hasty constructions meant to impede any potential enemy advancements, including makeshift barricades and provisional firing posts. Guided by the ambient glow of antiquated gas lamps, they maneuvered through a significant intersection and, subsequently, found themselves navigating the serpentine twists and turns of a labyrinthine corridor that plunged into the bowels of the complex. The ancient gas lamps, embedded within the corroded walls of the corridor, emitted an eerie, hissing sound. The outdated network of pipes supplying the gas to these lamps was far from reliable, resulting in an unsettling flickering and dimming of the lamp's luminosity. Beneath this insufficient illumination, a formidable door, wrought from a dense alloy, stood ominously at the end of the corridor, shrouded in the encompassing darkness. The rhythmic sound of Agatha's staff and high-heeled shoes tapping against the stone floor reverberated eerily through the hollow corridor as she approached this enigmatic door. The door's seal bore signs of decay, possibly as a result of its long and forgotten existence. A thin fissure could be spotted between the two imposing door panels, betraying a glimpse into the unknown beyond. The lead block that originally bolstered the bolt had evidently endured some form of impact. It was visibly stretched and torn. An embossed nameplate, a steel relic of Frost City Hall, was affixed beside the door. This puzzling discovery had been made by an exploration team deep underground. The peculiar door situated in the heart of the Second Waterway's central region that Agatha had previously mentioned to Governor Winston. City Hall had cordoned off this area, yet the governor was oblivious to the presence of this door. Documentation relevant to this door seemed to have vanished during the tumultuous period that succeeded the end of the Frost Queen, Ray Norris, rule. In times of hardship and uncertainty, memory can often disregard such trivial details as the ceiling of a forsaken tunnel in some dark, dank recess of the city. Was this door a potential sanctuary for the nefarious Annihilation cultists? Or perhaps it was one of the many enigmas that the Frost Queen had left behind as her legacy to the world? Agatha stretched out her hand, gingerly brushing her fingers against the rough, cold surface of the heavy alloy. A strangely dull and numbing sensation spread from her fingertips, with only the door's coldness registering distinctly. "Shall we proceed with opening this door?" inquired a guardian, cloaked in a black robe, stepping forth from the shadows. "We have received authorization from the governor's office." True, Governor Winston did provide his consent. Agatha responded with a gentle shake of her head, but this door, which has remained ensnared in darkness for countless years, should not be hastily tampered with. There could be dangerous entities lurking behind it. I will assess the situation beyond the door first. The guardians in her vicinity instantly comprehended their leader's directive and retreated a few steps. Agatha raised her gaze to the sliver of a gap between the door panels and extended her hand once more, ready to explore the unknown. Nothing transpired as Agatha expected. Her face creased into a perplexed frown. Observing her confusion, a black-robed guardian sidled over, curiosity glinting in his eyes. Is there a complication? No, there's no issue, Agatha replied, shaking her head dismissively, then swiftly recaptured her focus. Finally, an unexpected gust of wind whirled across the barren expanse, causing her form to morph into a spectral haze of gray mist. This ghostly apparition of wind cycled twice in front of the imposing door before seeping through the narrow fissure. Remain vigilant and hold your positions until I return, Agatha commanded. The captain of the black-robed guardians released a sigh of relief after witnessing the lady's success in bypassing the locked gate. He then promptly set about instructing his team to establish a secure perimeter within the corridor. On the other side of the door, the gray cyclone found itself engulfed by a dimly lit expanse after infiltrating the crack. The ethereal wind spun momentarily before it merged back into the figure of Agatha. Having safely traversed the door, the gatekeeper threw a backward glance at her recent passage, then instinctively scanned her own state, her brow knitting together in slight worry. Why does the magic I routinely wield feel somewhat strained today? Even my body's responsiveness appears to be lagging slightly, Agatha murmured to herself, perplexed. Dismissing her initial confusion, she shook her head and directed her focus back to the urgent task at hand. She examined the strange environment around her, the lantern fastened to her waist emanating a feeble yellow light that tentatively pushed back against the oppressive darkness. There seemed to be numerous unseen entities rustling within the shadows, but all fell silent under her scrutinous gaze. In front of her lay a damp, pitch-black tunnel with exposed earth and metallic stones glistening sporadically in her faint light. The dim glow of her lantern revealed the presence of supporting beams and pillars, as well as an array of miscellaneous debris strewn about. Agatha's brow furrowed in thought. This location didn't seem to be a segment of the second waterway. A regular sewer passage wouldn't bear such structural features. Instead, the space concealed behind the door felt eerily like a long-forgotten mine. A mine? Agatha's gaze climbed thoughtfully towards the wet, stone-laden ceiling above as if her eyes were capable of piercing through the dense rock and soil, soaring upwards to the myriad tunnels, vertical shafts, dormant machinery, and inclined planes above. This particular segment of the second waterway, embedded within the city's heart, intertwined with the subterranean network of metal mines. Apparently, a substantial portion of the sewer system had been repurposed as the mine's drainage network during the Frost Queen's reign. The closest point to the mines within these convoluted tunnels could very well be behind a single, concealed door. As she strolled leisurely along the mined path, an increasing number of questions began to germinate in her mind. This location was unmistakably a mine, yet it appeared as though it had been spared from the total corruption or deformation by the sinister forces of darkness. This deduction was inferred from the presence of residual ores scattered within the mine, which inherently held an aura of natural purity. But why would such an innocuous mine require the protection of such an imposingly vast door? If the decree to seal this mine was issued by the first city hall following the termination of the Frost Queen's rule, what were the unique attributes of this mine that provoked such trepidation? Moreover, it was evident that this mine had been deserted, but the reason for its abandonment was perplexing. The mine wasn't contaminated, there were no monstrous creatures, no mirages, and then it dawned upon her. There were no ore veins. Agatha halted abruptly, her gaze methodically analyzing the exposed excavation layer beneath the sloping sides of the mine. She was beginning to decipher the dissonance that had been plaguing her. There were no metallic veins in this mine. Meanwhile, within City Hall, situated at the summit of the former Queen's Palace, the corpulent Governor Winston was sequestered within his domed office. Clothed in a blue coat, he was engrossed in manipulating a refined mechanical component. The brass mechanical model emitted a soft clicking noise as the interconnected gears and rods revolved within his grasp. Each meshing and revolution was characterized by a profound precision and a chillingly beautiful symmetry. The embodiment of intellect, the epitome of engineering, the triumph of civilization. The whirling gears symbolized the insignia and testament of human civilization. Winston positioned the mechanical model before him, indifferently wiping a smear of oil from the base of the model using a decorative ribbon from his coat. Once cleaned, he nodded approvingly, an expression of contented admiration gracing his features as if he were appreciating an exquisite work of art. Metal ores are the lifeblood of Frost, and the mining machinery, the heart that circulates this vital fluid. Engaged in a soliloquy directed partly at himself and partly at the intricate miniature machine before him, Winston gently maneuvered the tiny brass gears with his finger while voicing his thoughts under his breath. 50 years, they passed as swiftly as a fleeting dream. He rose leisurely from his seat and ambled towards the window. Through the expanse of the wide glass window, the dense fog blanketing the entire city was visible. The fog swirled and billowed, obscuring the distinct outlines and boundaries of the buildings and roads as though they were merging into the cityscape. Even the majestic church located across the open space had been reduced to a vague silhouette amidst the fog. The numerous towering spires and steeples appeared as though they were giants gasping for breath, on the verge of succumbing within the smothering haze. Winston's gaze remained composed as he studied the fog outside his window. The sound of alarm bells tolling in the distance wafted towards him, punctuated by the sporadic commands of the guardians and sheriffs assembling and strategizing in the square. Such an expansive and unusual fog would inevitably alert City Hall. Even without his explicit order as the governor, the city's defense forces would initiate operations in accordance with pre-established procedures. However, maintaining order amidst this dense haze might be the simplest challenge they would face in the imminent future. After contemplating the foggy scene for some time, Winston finally moved away from the window and strolled towards a specific spot in his office. Situated near the window was a petite round table. Wisps of fog infiltrated through the crevices of the cracks, dancing and twirling around the table. In the misty whiteness, he observed two items placed on the table. One was a pile of weathered, brittle files, the other was a meticulously constructed revolver. The files were composed and structured in a traditional format. The exquisite paper edges were adorned with intricate, elaborate print fringes, radiating the unique sophisticated ambiance of the Frost Queen's era. Warning of ore exhaustion, investigation report on the mine, analysis of the inspection results of mining samples. Most of the files were reviewed and authorized between the years 1840 and 1845, and the signature endorsing the review belonged to Ray Nora. The revolver was a prized possession from Governor Winston's personal collection, a classic design from 12 years prior. Even in the present day, it remains robust and dependable. The well-preserved handle and the gun mechanism glistened with an oily sheen, suggesting that it could continue its service for 12 more years, or perhaps even longer. Winston's gaze hovered over the files before ultimately settling on the revolver. He extended his hand and grasped the cool, heavy metal, inspecting its chamber before snapping it back into place. Slowly, he raised his right hand, positioning the barrel of the gun against his temple, a location chosen meticulously by its owner. A few seconds passed before he finally lowered the gun. "This spot will do, I'll remember to use it later," Winston murmured softly. He then ensured the safety of the gun mechanism and securely fastened the revolver in the holster at his waist. The sounds of hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor outside his office. "Your Excellency, the fog enveloping the city is intensifying." "I'm aware, I'm on my way," Winston replied. Beneath the city, inside the cold and damp recesses of the second waterway, Agatha, the stalwart gatekeeper, ventured deeper into the foreboding chasm. It was a grim, inhospitable space that threatened to consume her with its pervading chill and looming uncertainty. Her uniform, a once proud symbol of the city-state's defenders, was now threadbare and tattered. It had lost its original luster, just like her battered combat staff. Once a marvel of advanced technology, the staff now bore the signs of relentless battles with numerous marks and scratches. Her physical pain and fatigue had faded into a distant memory, replaced by the eerie resonance of the underground world echoing in her ears. Although Agatha felt as if she had been drained of all her blood, her heart continued to persevere, beating a determined rhythm in the face of imminent death. The specter of mortality was so close that every breath she drew seemed laced with the icy touch of the hereafter. Alone in this darkened tunnel, there were no allies to accompany her, and it felt like an eternity since she had faced off against an enemy. Yet, Agatha was not entirely alone. As she neared the brink of death, a faint flame flickered to life, providing a comforting warmth that belied its modest intensity. Cradling the sudden spark close to her chest with her left hand, Agatha allowed its soft green light to play on her face, casting eerie shadows that danced along the dingy corridor. She cherished the subtle warmth that the flame emitted, an essential respite against the increasing cold that seemed to mark her journey ahead. But was it the path that was becoming colder, or was it her own body succumbing to the chill? She couldn't discern the truth. As she navigated her way, Agatha confided in her luminescent companion, "I've passed the junction in the upper city and am now entering the labyrinthine tunnels surrounding the metal mine." She studied an old, worn-out plaque affixed to the wall nearby. This relic of a bygone era held maps of the city streets above the sewers, allowing her to orient herself and ascertain her current location. "The path here has been eerily devoid of adversaries, but an oppressive, biting cold hinders my progress." Deep and solemn, a voice reverberated in her heart, suggesting, "Perhaps, the cultists have abandoned their efforts to obstruct your path by sending their minions. They may be focusing on the impending climax." Agatha inquired, "What's the situation on the surface?" "A thick fog has engulfed the entire city-state. The city's defenders are keeping order, urging the populace to remain inside their homes. At certain intersections, squads of defenders can be spotted, lanterns in hand to guide their night patrol amidst the dense fog that blocks the sun's energy," the solemn voice informed Agatha. "A similar fog is also rising from the sea surrounding the city-state, possibly spreading hundreds of nautical miles out into the open water." "The heretics have made their move," Agatha murmured softly into the hollow silence. "It's possible that my intervention has forced their hand, pushing them to act ahead of schedule." "Your state doesn't seem to be at its peak." "Indeed, I might be severely wounded," Agatha responded, persisting in her relentless advance. She found her breath hitching with exertion, but her mental clarity was astonishingly unscathed. "However, don't concern yourself with my well-being. I am ready to face the possibility of death. I promise to carry your spark into the heart of their stronghold, come what may. I would much prefer it if you were to complete this mission while still among the living. Agatha, you might be a servant of the god of death, but there's no need to hasten your audience with Bardock. That being said, I've recently found myself pondering something about you death clerics. In your eyes, is death a demotion or a promotion?" Caught off guard, Agatha paused for a moment, a shadow of a smile creeping onto her lips. "Your attempt at humor is unexpected. Regrettably, I can't provide a satisfactory response. I doubt any cleric of death throughout the annals of history has ever contemplated such a question. But if the chance arises later, I'll ponder it. I look forward to hearing your insights." The voice in her mind retreated into silence. With a soft exhalation, Agatha felt a strange sensation, as if her laboring breaths were becoming a tad smoother and her footsteps a bit more agile. She stole a glance at the fragile spark cradled protectively in her left hand and moved past yet another point. Water seeped from an adjacent drain, pooling on the cold stone floor into a modest puddle. The tranquil surface of the water reflected the dim, arched ceiling of the waterway. As Agatha carefully sidestepped the puddle, the otherwise calm surface quivered, the ripples distorting the mirror-like reflection to reveal an apparition. It was a figure shrouded in a black cloak, swathed in bandages, and gripping a simple metal staff. From whence Agatha had come, the spectral figure was moving in the opposite direction. For a brief, fleeting moment, their paths intersected. Without warning, Agatha came to an abrupt halt, her gaze drawn back to the spot she had just navigated. A perplexed expression crossed her face as she noticed the small puddle, its surface still resonating with ripples from her recent passage. In the shattered and fragmented reflection, the spectral figure was nowhere to be seen, yet Agatha couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something. It was an image of a figure that bore a striking resemblance to her, yet not quite the same. The figure was dressed in a battle-worn black robe riddled with scars, suggesting a history of relentless combat. Its path was set toward the deeper recesses of the second waterway, the exact place she had just left. As she stood in silent contemplation, a voice called out from behind her, breaking her train of thought, "Gatekeeper? Is something amiss?" "That puddle," Agatha abruptly turned, indicating a distant point with an outstretched finger. "Has it always been there? Did you spot anything peculiar about it?" "The puddle?" Her subordinate followed her line of sight, a hint of confusion crossing her face. "Yes, it has been there, but I can't say I noticed anything unusual about it." Agatha didn't offer a reply, instead falling into a thoughtful silence. Her eyes were fixated on the puddle's gently rippling surface, and as the moments passed, her gaze deepened, filled with profound contemplation and gravity. "Did you see something?" her subordinate finally asked, unable to hide the growing concern in her voice. After what seemed like an eternity, Agatha slowly shook her head, her voice a comforting whisper. "Don't worry, everything is fine, everything is fine." Her subordinate appeared still somewhat bewildered, but the somber expression on Agatha's face urged her to suppress her curiosity. Swiftly, she shifted the conversation. "Did you discover something beyond that door? You had a grave look when you returned." Agatha's fragmented thoughts quickly solidified. Lifting her gaze, she looked back in the direction they had traveled from. The entrance leading to the deserted mine was now obscured behind a series of turns, yet she could still recall with striking clarity what she had stumbled upon in the gloomy depth of that mine. She had not ventured far into the mine. After confirming her suspicions, she promptly guided her team back along the second waterway and set course for the base. Out of a sense of caution, she also refrained from revealing her discoveries to her subordinates. Even now, she was uncertain about how to articulate her strange and unnerving hypothesis to the dedicated protectors before her. Hesitant for a fleeting moment, she finally turned on her heel and continued towards the base. Having covered some distance, she softly broke the silence as if musing aloud. How does frost sustain its existence? How does frost maintain its existence? Her subordinate was taken aback, unable to grasp the context of Agatha's query. After a brief pause, she ventured tentatively, "You mean, the source of the city-state's income? The trade in selling metal ore?" "Metal ores are the lifeblood of Frost, and the mine is the city-state's heart," Agatha intoned cryptically, puzzling the guardians clad in black. "It seems none of us have ever considered when this heart might falter." Another guardian, visibly anxious, stepped forward, concern etched across her face. "You." Agatha raised her hand gently, effectively cutting her subordinate off. "Try not to overthink it for now, nothing is confirmed yet. Yes, I did find something behind that door, but before I can share it with you, I need to discuss with the Archbishop." With these words, Agatha seemed to have regained her momentarily lost composure. Perhaps her worries had been premature. It was only an arid, forsaken mine, and it was not unusual to find barren tunnels within an ancient mine that had been excavated extensively over the years. The city council's decision to seal it off was likely motivated by other factors. Most probably some sort of contamination that may have existed at some point but was now no longer detectable. Jumping to conclusions prematurely was a grave mistake in investigative work. Agatha gave her head a slight shake, but the image that had appeared in the puddle crept back into her thoughts. The eerie reflection of herself, smeared with blood, and walking in the opposite direction. Agatha gently closed her eyes, her knuckles turning a shade lighter from the tight grip she had on her staff. However, moments later, she shot open her eyes again, her face a picture of calm resolve. There was much more she had to do. In silence, Agatha led her group of guardians back to their underground base, located at the junction of the tunnels. Upon their arrival, she was immediately struck by an unusual atmosphere. An air of tension hung heavy over the base. A priestess, looking as though she had just descended from the vertical shaft, was engaged in an urgent conversation with the base's defense coordinator. Several steam walkers that had been dispatched earlier to patrol the adjacent tunnels were called back prematurely and seemed to be getting ready to ascend to the surface using the elevator. Agatha quickly approached them, but before she could ask anything, the commander of the base, a guardian clad in black, spoke up urgently. "Gatekeeper, there's a situation on the surface." Agatha's eyebrows knitted together in concern. What kind of situation? Fog, an extensive and strange fog, has enshrouded the entire city-state and extended to the sea. The sky is so overcast that it's obscuring the sun, the commander explained hurriedly. Also, hostile entities have emerged in the library and archives. Although the on-duty scholars managed to suppress them quickly, the city is now in the grip of panic and chaos. The Archbishop has sent someone here, requesting your immediate return. The world seemed to be blanketed in a thick haze, as if submerged deep into an ocean of murky gray liquid. This fog blurred the boundaries of everything in sight, obscuring both the distant cityscape and the nearby streets, making everything shadowy and indistinct. Having recently resurfaced from her expedition through the second waterway, Agatha found herself standing at the exit of the transportation hub, utterly taken aback by the surreal scene unfolding before her. The normally bustling streets were now devoid of pedestrians, and even the nearby streetlights were reduced to blurry orbs of light, struggling to penetrate the thick blanket of fog. Beyond these floating orbs, the only visible elements were a series of dim red lights moving sluggishly through the fog. These were the warning lights from the city's steam walkers, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of steam machinery marching through the streets. The city's protectors, guardians, and sheriffs have been dispatched to various intersections. Movement between districts has been put on hold, and civilian vehicles have been banned from the roads, reported a church pastor who had come to greet Agatha. The city dwellers who couldn't make it home before the onset of the fog are being directed to seek shelter in the vicinity. Most of the designated shelters are already full to capacity. We're working with the security department to guide the people towards churches, warehouses, and the closest subway stations. The pastor paused at this stage, releasing a heavy sigh. It's unfortunate, we could have accommodated more people in places like libraries, but any place storing books is now undergoing a sort of erosion. All repositories of books have been quarantined. This fog started to form right around the time of shift changes at the city's factories. As a result, many people were stuck far from home. Throughout this, Agatha remained quiet. Instead, she slowly shifted her gaze from the deserted street, looking pensively towards the fog-blanketed sky. The combination of dense cloud cover and the city's engulfing fog obstructed everything, transforming what should be bright daylight into a dim, twilight-like atmosphere. In this sea of chaotic gray, the sun was nowhere to be found. Despite everything, it's daytime now, she murmured. Yes, it's daytime, but this unusual fog might be blocking out the sun's rays, the pastor responded solemnly, a hint of anxiety seeping into his voice. The erosion we observed in the library might be related to this. Nothing can obstruct the sun's power during the day. As long as Vision 001 is in the sky, the power of the sun will remain constant, even if the clouds block the sunlight and the city is as dark as night. Agatha gently shook her head, contradicting the pastor. In my opinion, this dense fog is not the cause, but more a symptom of a larger crisis at hand. Tell me, what's the situation on the peak? The cathedral is currently filled to the brim with people, the pastor quickly responded. Concurrently, several steam walkers, their warning lights flashing like disoriented stars, rumbled their way onto the wide expanse near the exit of the transport station. Among these mechanized behemoths, a vehicle emblazoned with the church's emblem stood out. This is your ride. We'll head back to the mountain first and discuss the situation further during our journey. Together, Agatha and the pastor climbed into the flagged car. The steam walkers projected their high-powered beams into the fog, barely cutting through the soupy grayness to illuminate the road ahead. Unfortunately, the vehicle had no choice but to move noticeably slower than usual, charting its course towards the cathedral perched on the mountain peak. The onset of this fog caught many worshippers and tourists unprepared, leaving them stranded on the mountain. The cathedral has been doing its best to provide shelter to everyone. Those who we couldn't accommodate were transferred to the nearby old church museum. The priest continued to update Agatha as their car trudged along. City Hall has also set up makeshift shelters, ensuring nobody is left out in the open. Archbishop Ivan has done an admirable job in maintaining a sense of calm within the cathedral and has been using psychic communication to keep in touch with the city's various chapels. So far, no widespread panic or ensuing contamination has been reported. A deep, mechanical growl resonated from outside the car window, causing Agatha to swivel her head towards the source of the sound. She saw a series of elongated aerial tracks jutting out from above the mountain road, disappearing into the foggy horizon. Like silent titans, immense support pillars held the tracks aloft, and a hefty cargo container hung from one of them, rumbling into the fog-shrouded distance. The container's red warning lights blinked erratically, appearing like countless eyes peering out from the mist. This was the transport system integral to Frost's most significant industry. The mined raw ores would initially be moved to a crushing and sorting facility, and then further transported to a massive furnace at the base of the mountain, courtesy of these gigantic containers and mountain tracks. Is the mining track still operational? Agatha asked, turning towards the priest in surprise. Didn't the workers seek refuge? Her thoughts flashed back to a scene she had witnessed not long ago, deep underground in an ancient mining tunnel, which had been depleted decades ago. The workers did seek refuge, The priest looked surprised at the sight of the cargo container but replied confidently, "The church at the mining site confirmed it. It's likely the last batch of raw ore from the excavation site just arriving. It was probably dispatched automatically by the sorting machine. As you know, the extracted ores are stored in a holding area for some time before they're shipped out. It's part of the programmed routine. The machine will simply..." Suddenly, an ominous rumble cut through the fog, abruptly halting the priest's confident explanation. Every pair of eyes in the car darted towards the source of the sound, only to spot another dark cargo container barreling down the same aerial track from the opposite direction, on a collision course with the container that had just passed over the mountain road. "They're going to crash." The priest barely had enough time to yell a warning before the catastrophic collision ensued. The two cargo containers clashed violently on the aerial track, creating a horrifying cacophony and an explosive burst of energy. The side of one container was ripped open like a tin can, scattering minerals that shimmered with a gentle golden glow all over the mountainside as if it were raining nuggets of gold. Following the violent oscillation of the containers on the track, the drive and auxiliary wheels dislodged, the axles snapped, and the mangled container plunged into the valley below, trailing a shower of sparks and a plume of thick smoke. A shard of debris hurtling from above narrowly missed the car Agatha was in and crashed into the roadside. Before anyone in the car could react to this initial disaster, another distressing sound of metal rending echoed from above. The aerial track, which had borne the brunt of the violent impact, was warping and twisting grotesquely. Sparks erupted from the peak of one of the towering iron supports holding the track, and the steel beams and cables, taut from the tension, snapped with a resounding twang. Then, a whole segment of the track descended from the sky, plummeting towards them. "Evade!" The priest in the car screamed out in terror, but even before his outcry could fully escape his lips, the convoy had already begun to avoid the rain of debris from above. The steam walkers dispersed rapidly, and the steam car at the convoy's center accelerated. After a few heart-stopping seconds, a thunderous crash echoed from behind Agatha. Whirling around, she saw the shattered track that had obliterated the main mountain road. Two steam walkers were stranded on the other side of the debris, thankfully unscathed. They immediately started to clamber up the rubble with their long mechanical limbs, high-pressure steam venting from the seams in their armor, merging with the foggy backdrop. The second and fourth walkers can't navigate through the wreckage. They're likely planning to ascend and reach the smaller path above and reroute back to the cathedral. We needn't wait for them. Agatha quickly assessed the situation and commanded, "Keep moving." That was too close. The priest beside her couldn't resist wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. "We nearly got hit." Agatha couldn't agree more and lapsed into a thoughtful silence. Was this a mere coincidence, or could it have been a deliberate act? Why was a cargo carriage traversing in the opposite direction on a mining track explicitly designed for unidirectional traffic? At this time, all the miners should have sought shelter. The track system operator should have also evacuated after initiating the last train. Also, loading cargo onto the track entails a safety mechanism that prevents departure if another carriage is already on the track. The sorting machine is responsible for this process, and a properly functioning device wouldn't make such errors. Instead, it would diligently execute the program encoded on the punched tape. There's no room for mishap in this mechanical ballet. This means the sorting machine at the mine might be malfunctioning. Agatha mused out loud. But it might not just be the sorting machine at the mine that's experiencing difficulties. If malevolent spirits could penetrate the library during the day, the scope and urgency of this anomaly could potentially exceed everyone's initial estimates. The distant ringing of alarm bells from the city streets subtly permeated the air. A wild, icy wind swept unimpeded across the desolate cemetery while the dense fog shrouded everything in an opaque veil. Within this impenetrable haze, it felt as if countless whispered secrets were blending and reverberating, akin to the restless murmurings of the departed. Suddenly, the sound of a gun being cocked splintered the silence hanging over the cemetery. The weak glow of a lantern pushed back the foggy shadows. An aged man with a stooped posture tightly clutched a reliable double-barreled shotgun, standing watch on the path, his eyes trained on the orderly array of coffins lurking in the fog. For now, the whispers were just figments of the imagination. The coffins remained stationary on their funeral platforms, and their inhabitants continued to lie in undisturbed repose. Yet, the eerie sense of foreboding in the atmosphere couldn't fool the veteran soldier. He knew something was wrong. The cemetery wouldn't retain its peace tonight, and some of the residents he was caring for were slowly beginning to stir.